This is Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Brian Browning with All-American cornerback Chekwa. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Chim, it's officially week 0. We have survived the summer, and we're going to have college football kicking off this week. How are you doing? What's going on? I know you're excited. What's up, man?
I'm pumped up. To me, the season started today because Ryan Day has come out and named the quarterback today. So the season officially started. I'm pumped up, man. I'm ready to go. I think the team is getting there. They're going to be ready to go here soon, and they need to be because week 1, heavyweight matchup starting early. So yeah, I'm excited, man.
Hey man, you say you're excited, man, but I'm not feeling the juice though. But man, it'll kick in a little bit later. But yes, Coach Day has named the starter and Julian Sayin. I'm not gonna say he was pulling teeth. I feel like overall and what we saw and what all the reports are that he had 2 good guys competing to see who could be most consistent and kind of earn that spot. And obviously, we was hoping that he made that decision before the season started. He didn't let it get to week 1, and he did go ahead and make that decision with Julian. What's your thoughts there? Did he make the right decision? Is Lincoln going to play as well? What's your initial thoughts of Coach Day and the pressure today kind of, going forward and naming the body?
Yeah, I think, and, when they interview Day, I think he tends to be pretty honest, but I think there's also, I want to make this clear. He chose a quarterback. I think, we all kind of felt that Sayin was going to end up emerging as the guy. He was able to choose a guy clearly before that, week 1 matchup versus Texas, which I think is important. But when you listen to Day talk about, the 2 quarterbacks and, Sayin being named the guy, he also mentioned that it was a close competition. He also mentioned that, Lincoln has to come and, prepare every day like he's going to be playing, like he's a starter. And I think that's important to continue to reinforce that, also to reinforce that it was a real competition even through fall camp. Because I think what he wants to do is remind Lincoln that, the competition isn't necessarily over. Right? We chose a quarterback, but the plans can change based on how things develop. And I'm not saying that Sayin will lose the position, but in football, the reality is if you're the second guy, there's a chance in a long season that you're going to play. And for Lincoln, it's going to be important because it's going to be important for him individually, and it's going to be important for the team because at some point during this season, we are going to need him to come in and help win the football game. I don't know when it's going to happen. Yeah. I don't know how it happens, but at some point it's going to happen. And I want to make this point too. I know Sayin was a guy who won, but I want to make this point about Lincoln. Like when you're the second guy, when you lose that competition early, you're still a young player. Like it's really, really important that you figure out a way to continue to develop because the other guy has a leg up. He's playing, he's playing in the real games. He's playing, he's starting, he's getting most of the reps, etc. So he's going to continue to grow, continue to develop. But that second guy has to develop because whether he ends up playing at Ohio State or he ends up competing for a job elsewhere, like a Devin Brown, right? We heard the news about Devin Brown losing, winning that competition. At some point, you got to prove that you're able to just go out there and lead a team, right? So I think it was important for Day to mention that Lincoln was in a close competition and he needs to continue to prepare to be a starter. But I think it's no surprise that Sayin is the guy who won the job in the end. And to me, it speaks to the approach that we kind of saw as the identity of Ohio State in the playoffs and being a team that's going to attack you with explosive plays, spread the ball around from a receiver standpoint, and then work off of that. But before I go into that a little bit deeper, I want to get your perspective on naming the quarterback here today by Ryan Day.
Yeah, I think it's important. I like it. I think, going into week 1, the way week 1 is, right, against a Texas, like you can't, you want your guys to be confident. You want your guys to understand, things they can do, things that they're working on, and things that they need to just kind of watch out for in general. So I like the fact that he went ahead and named the guy when we got a couple more weeks here to kind of really get prepped up. We're basically a week, right, to kind of get ready here for the season kickoff. And then 2, it's interesting that, he has to name a starter. I like he named a starter. But for Lincoln, like, you know, he got to keep, like you say, honing his skills. What are the things that you good at that you bring to the table? You're not Julian Sayin. So, you know, there's going to be certain things that Julian naturally does well that maybe you cannot do. But what are the things that you bring to the table and the ways you could kind of impact the game and continue to work those things, stay in shape, stay in tune to the weekly game plan and things of that nature. So when you do get your opportunity, you're ready to go. Because like you said, we get into this game and we don't know what we're gonna get out of Julian Sayin. Obviously, you know, it's kind of a fine line. You don't want Julian to go out there and be looking behind him, thinking if he make a mistake, he's gonna get pulled. But at the same time, you know, we expect Lincoln to kind of go out there and make good decisions, understand where he needs to be with certain places, where the ball's supposed to go in certain situations. And if we don't see that from him, then, you know, you start kind of opening the door for, you know, Lincoln or someone else to kind of step in there. But I like that they made that decision. Hey, hone in. We got a big one coming. You're the guy. You're the guy. You're the guy. Be confident about your abilities, the things that you could do, Sayin. Go out there, lead that team. And as Coach Day said in this pressure, just win the game. Win by 1 point, 3 points, shootout, win the game, and everything else will kind of take care of itself from there.
Yeah, these quarterback competitions are tough, especially in college where you're not competing against and you know other teams. You're just competing against yourself, and you kind of use some of those jersey scrimmages to get some insight. But in reality, when you have two guys, one guy insane who's, I mean, since the first time I saw him throw the ball early on in camp, I was like, this kid could throw a really accurate ball. It's a pretty ball. But Lincoln gives you, I mean, he could throw the ball too, but he also gives you that athletic dynamic as well, which in a quarterback competition through camp and playing against your teammates, it's kind of hard to get the full vision of what that looks like without without being in the game, honestly. But I also think, last year there was a little bit of emphasis from Ryan Day in, implementing or, starting to introduce a little bit more quarterback run, right? And you look at who we had on the roster, Devin Brown, we had Lincoln, who was young, and then you had Will Howard that you brought in as well, and then Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. That emphasis on quarterback run kind of made sense. But it didn't seem like they did that much of it. I mean, some key moments they used it with Will. Yeah. It didn't seem like they did that much of it, honestly. And it kind of feels like Ryan Day's identity remains who it always has been. And with a guy like Sayin who can deliver the ball in the way that we've seen him deliver a football, I think it just fits how they really approach the game and kind of how they were able to go on that run in the playoffs this past year. So, one thing Hardline said in the press conference, and I think, they try to choose their words wisely because they don't want to disparage one guy to big up the other. The one thing he said about Sayin is that he was consistent, being able to take care of the ball, but also putting the ball in a place, where it gives their players an opportunity to make plays. And when I hear that, to me, the first thing I think is deep balls and back shoulder fade. All right, I think deep balls and back shoulder fades, but we have a lot of guys who can, execute on that. I'm talking from the top with Jeremiah Smith all the way to a true freshman that came in this year. And I expect a lot of that. I expect our identity to be attacking, Ryan Day scheming up the defense and getting those explosive plays, and that being a way to open up everything else. And I don't think we go away from that too much unless there is a quarterback change for whatever other reason, and then you implement maybe some of that quarterback run.
Yeah, I think so. We got a starter, 2025, Julian Sayin, it's your time to shine, and obviously we'll be bringing you guys more on that. But obviously now that camp is kind of coming to a conclusion, once again, they're starting to get more, let's say, game ready with Texas coming to town next weekend. Coach Day did name some, he didn't name starters, but he kind of spoke to some other competition kind of coming out of camp. One of them being the offensive line. We kind of spoke about that a lot last year, about how many guys that I visually saw that looks like they could kind of go out there and perform on Saturdays. Coach Day he kind of backed it, right? He said, obviously, we'll have a starting five, didn't really name guys, but kind of made it clear that we're going to play 6-7 guys in regular rotation once the season kicks off. What's your thoughts on that? Because to me, it's a little, it worked last year. It's still little bit crazy. But
Yeah. I'm more curious your thoughts on it, right?
Yeah.
6-7 guys, offensive line rotation. You used to defensive line rotating, and I don't anticipate he's gonna be rotating everybody on the offensive line. But
Yeah.
maybe those guard spots, maybe a right tackle, maybe a few guys get some extra reps. And maybe earlier in the season, while you're still kind of figuring out who's gonna be the five that you rely on in those key moments. But from an offensive lineman standpoint, does it mess up rhythm? What is your thoughts on any type of rotation in game on the offensive line?
I don't love it. I like this, a starting five to be your five unless someone goes down. But I understand in certain situations things are different. Obviously, we did this last year on our run to the national title in the playoffs. We decided we're going to start playing 5, 6, 7 guys once again in that guard position, kind of rotating guys in and out. And to be honest, it worked. So obviously that's kind of the mindset of the unit. But once again, I think it's also rare that you just have so many guys that has the ability to play. So that's probably kind of put them in a tough situation. Like, hey, we got to let these guys go. We let them kind of figure it out on the field. Maybe someone emerges, maybe they don't, and we kind of keep this rotation going. But it is interesting, an interesting way to kind of go about it, playing multiple guys. But it is what it is. It worked last time against Texas, so we had to be running it back.
It did, and I think it's kind of. I think part of it is, if somebody does go down or if there is a little bit of shakeup on that offensive line, you got guys who are ready to go, guys who have, been in the game, they've gotten the checks, they've done everything. So it's an easy, seamless rotation to just bring a guy in. That may be a swing guy. I think that's part of it. It's a long season. I think Coach Day and their staff, they've prepared for these new types of seasons where you can go on a playoff run in a different way with the expectation that we're going to have to play a lot of guys. And some guys are going to go down. I mean, it's football with a percent of injuries, 100%, right? So we're going to have to make sure everybody's ready to play. So I think we'll see that in a few other positions as well, where you see a little bit more rotation. Now, it gets tricky in a game like Texas because realistically, I mean, you could do a ton of rotation versus Grambling and some of these other teams.
To my TikTok Grambling.
Right. I saw that TikTok the other day. They seem like they're ready to go.
Yeah, look at them have fun. They're having fun, man.
They're having fun. They're having fun. They're gonna, But I think so. Another competition that has been live throughout camp is the second safety position. Obviously, we know Caleb Downs is a leader of that defense and is one of the mainstays from a safety standpoint. But Matt Patricia mentioned that both Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford are going to be guys that are going to play in this game. So we expect maybe some rotation at safety, or it's probably going to be, Caleb Downs moving down to a nickel spot, a dime type package, and maybe playing those other two safeties. So, you'll see some rotation there. I expect that corner, maybe some movement. I wouldn't say there's going to be a ton of rotation at corner. You got a true freshman and Devin Sanchez in the two deep. You got Aaron Scott, who I think both guys who I think are decent and ready to play. But in week one, with not a ton of experience, I don't think I expect a lot of rotation there. But I do think there's going to be some packages. Right? I think with Matt Patricia, he's known to utilize the versatility. So I think nickel package, you'll see some guys move around in some type of dime package or something like that on the third down. You may want to get one of those corners on the outside, on the inside to help with some tighter coverage. So, I think from camp, I think those are kind of the main competitions that kind of played out here recently. I think they got a good plan moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously, week one means a lot, right? We get to really test and see our guys early, but it's not the end of the season because once again, the way things are formatted, if things do not go our way, but we hope and plan our Buckeyes to be fully ready to go when they take on the Texas Longhorns. Well, man, let's kind of get into some more topics, man, going around Ohio State football, man. It's been more than reports, right? I think we had our GM Mark. He did a couple of interviews, and he hasn't said this directly, But he's kind of starting to hint at that, like, hey, we had the ruling come in. It kind of put a cap on what we should be spending NIL wise, and kind of getting an understanding. And other guys are just other teams. Certain teams are just, and he ain't going to names, but certain teams are just doing more to the point that it makes you question, hey, are they following the rules that we kind of came down with this ruling? And he kind of said, to make an example, like, we're trying to give a fair competitive offer to a player that we think we really want. And other schools are literally doubling that offer when it comes to what they plan on, spending regarding NIL on certain guys. So what's your thoughts on that? Are we falling? Are we losing here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think we're taking some L's. But I think there's two parts to it, right? On one end, Ohio State is trying to follow the NCAA standard and the rule that is kind of implied, but it's not necessarily being enforced, right? Which leads to limitations in how far they're willing to go to get some of these recruits that they're competing for. And other schools aren't, right? And maybe other schools are until they really need a guy. Right? We really need this left tackle, or we really need this D tackle. Yeah, we're gonna do whatever we want to, or whatever we need to do to get that guy. And at the end of the day, what we've seen is that the NCAA is not really willing, or I don't know if it's willing, if they even have the power to truly enforce any rule and for it to stick. I think the other side to it, though, is Ohio State has to have a structure and a process for themselves, right? Because you can't realistically get all of these 4 and 5-star guys year in and year out and continue to offer them the most money, right? It's just not possible. At some point, you got to balance the budget, because here's the thing that people miss at times is those 4 and 5-star guys aren't signing for 1 year.
Yeah.
They're signing for the 4, the 3 years, maybe the 5 years that they're going to be here. So you got to pay them again next year. You got to pay them again next year. And if the price keeps going up for the guys incoming, that means the price keeps going up each year. And it's hard to be able to continue to maintain that year in and year out. So I think there's a little bit of both of those things going on. It's really just the budget for Ohio State on top of the kind of unenforced but written rule that exists that they're trying to follow. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think they just need to have an awareness and an approach as of, what to do if things change. We got to consider the portal for certain positions, or we got to be prepared for some of these guys that got offered a ton of money for some of these things to fall through. And if they do, we are able to go get those guys in the transfer portal. So I think it's just something that it's just a continued evolution. I honestly think while this year especially, you've seen some drop off. I think for the most part, as rules have changed and evolved and clarity has been given, I think they've been able to react fast and really well. But this year it really is starting to feel like, in the next 2 or 3 years, if this thing isn't figured out, that you kind of start to have a little bit of fall off from a depth standpoint at certain positions.
Yeah, because it's interesting that what was mentioned the most, and I think the key point was yes, concerned that maybe some guys are not following the rules, or as they kind of went out, but the concern of offering a player something and then not being able to get them that what they said they was going to be able to do when they was recruiting. That was a huge concern, and it's like, hey, I don't know how some people are doing it. I don't know where this money is coming from, or is it other, I hate to say dark money, but other money coming in that other people just can't see. What's that look like for that university? But that was something that he was really kind of hitting on and concerned on. But something I did want to kind of talk about, speaking of rules and following them and obeying them and doing certain things to protect your program. There's one university that had a ruling come out that was dependent for a while, but the team up north, they finally got their official ruling from the NCAA investigation. And to be honest, it was I really don't remember what happened. I think it was they fined them $20 million. But none of the major
Yeah.
things, no postseason bans, nothing taking wins away or trophies or anything of that nature. I don't know. I guess that's what we expected. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
The NCAA just doesn't hold the same level of power to overreach like they used to. And honestly, if I'm stacking the NCAA against Michigan, they're close right now in terms of who has the most power. I mean, listen, honestly, like Michigan has a lot of influence in media, business, etc. And the NCAA is like 0-105 now in terms of lawsuits. They're not winning anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a JUCO player, a former JUCO player who plays and his eligibility is up. He sues NCAA, he gets extra years. You get Division II player whose eligibility is up at Wisconsin. Guy played a couple of years at Division II, about to go to the NFL, sues the NCAA. Now he gets extra years. It seems like every rule that they really try to enforce and stop, they just can't do it, right? And from their perspective, I know the report came out and they basically said Michigan cheated.
Yeah.
They said they didn't want to punish the current players for a past, coaches' mistakes, which I tend to agree with, but I don't think that's really why they didn't, give him a postseason ban. I think they just didn't give a postseason ban because they don't want to deal with the lawsuit that comes back from Michigan, but they don't feel like they can actually win. Because what can they win at this point?
Yeah.
And they didn't want to vacate the past the past national championship that Michigan was able to reach, basically because they awarded them the national champion. They basically said they won it fair and square when it happened. So now, in hindsight, they can't go back and get rid of it. And I think really what happened during that run, after the story broke, right? Because it broke during the season, and you basically put a stop to the current cheating that was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like trial by play for the rest of the year, right? And I think the hope was that they just lose and don't make it, and in that way, we could vacate the season and all that stuff. Nobody really cares. It was an unsuccessful season, but since they made it all the way, well, there's nothing we could do about it. And the 2-year investigation is way too long.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like they put it off so that nobody cared anymore. And then we can come out with our ruling and then move on from it. So, I just think this NCAA is losing power. But
yeah, I mean, not losing power. It's like it almost felt like they only could come up with a punishment that they could get Michigan to agree to. And if you think about the history of the NCAA, that's kind of how it always works, right? Even with when our last year and the scandal we got into, it only worked because we agreed to it as an institution, as a Ohio State, Coach Tressel and Gene Smith. Okay, we'll do these things. Okay, we'll do these things. And Michigan took us another standpoint, like, no, we don't. We throwing our hands up. We didn't do anything wrong. Prove it. And then they proved it. But even then, when they proved it, it's still like you say. It's like, what can they enforce? But but for the record, Michigan's title was tainted. Coach Harbaugh is not the guy he is in the media, and some of the things that he because the blatant cheating was there. It took place. Just so happened that you can't punish guys as you used to. But but end of that story. We got to beat them in 25. That's the only thing that really matters in the long run. But man, let's get back to Ohio State, man. Coach Day named some captains. He also gave out his Black O jersey. Sonny Styles will be wearing that Black O jersey at Ohio State. Named captains Caleb Downs, Brandon Ennis, Sonny Styles, and Austin Sherfield is the fourth captain for this 25 team. Any surprises, or that what you would expect from this team kind of going forward to this year?
I think on defense, Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs. I mean, if you were to ask me who's going to be the captains, I would name those two guys. I view Caleb as the leader, but obviously Sonny has emerged as a guy. Really, remember, he played safety for his first 2 years. But as the guy wearing the Black Hole jersey is definitely a major leader on this entire team. On offense, it's kind of, it's a emergence of new leaders, because those two guys that we named on defense were leaders last year as well. But Brandon Ennis, getting the vote from his peers and being named a captain, shout out to him. To me, he's still a young player, right? A guy who hasn't played a ton of snaps on offense compared to some of the receivers that he's playing next to this year. But he's always been the kind of guy who felt like the right type of teammate, felt like a guy who connects with his teammates. And I think that's earned him to be in this position as a leader on his team. And it feels good that he's a leader. Like it feels good that he a guy who's emerging into a position that basically was Emeka Egbuka's position last year, who was clearly a leader and a guy who did everything on the football field. It feels good that Brandon Ennis walking into that position is another guy who can kind of step into that spot and be that type of leader as well. So shout out to him. That's big time.
Yeah. I think it's huge. And also for Austin, because like both of these guys was not, obviously Austin played a lot last year and he started several games due to injuries and things of that nature. But essentially, when you look at the starting five as a starter season, he wasn't there. He played his way there. Just like this season, it's kind of some up and down, who's going to line up where, and through his performance, he kind of earns that left tackle spot for Ohio State. As in Brandon, and he's just an energy guy, like you said. I mean, he's a one of those guys, great teammate, great energy in practice when it's hot and things are down. Somehow Brandon still got some energy and some juice, and he's kind of showing it and displaying it and spreading it around to his teammates. So kudos to those guys. I think that's definitely a strong unit for the 25 season. And obviously they get to kind of go on and have their name in extra stone at Ohio State for being captains for the 25 season.
And we got some FanDuel odds. Anything changed from the number line standpoint?
Man, nothing has changed. But once again, Ohio State is a 2.5 point favorite against Texas when it comes to the horseshoe. FanDuel also has Jeremiah Smith as fourth in the running for the Heisman. Obviously, it's funny, we did a lot of talking today. We didn't speak too much about Jeremiah Smith, man, but that speaks to the unit, man. We got a whole gang of guys here. But yeah, man. So nothing big changes there. But one more thing I did want to throw out: the Big Ten has once again been in the media, and it feels like a negotiating scheme. But they're looking at maybe extended the playoffs to 24 to 28 teams. Absolutely crazy, but I don't know. I've seen the NFL do this sometimes. We say, 17 games, 18 game season. We negotiated down to. We didn't get what we wanted. We stuck at 12. But man, I don't know, man. It's getting crazy.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to understand what people's incentives are, right? The incentive is more games, more playoff games, more high-level Big Ten games, more money for the conference. So at the end of the day, the teams are going to push for more games because it's going to generate more money, and that's the reality of it. Somebody has to stop it. Somebody has to, slow it down. But I don't know who that is going to be. There's no players union. There's none of that. So.
It's no way that the number 24 team in the nation is winning the national championship. It's just it's tough enough to lead the 16th team in the team. But whatever, man. We'll see how it plays. But man, that's our show, man. Obviously, we're gearing up. Big week coming up here for our guys prepping to get ready for that season kickoff here. We got college football this week. I think games start on Thursday, Friday, something of that sort. But it's time. We made it. We survived the heat. We got through the summer and we made it to football season. So, as always, feel free to follow us. YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We'll be bringing you guys weekly insights on what's going on with our Buckeyes. And we're going to end this show as we always do with a nice OH.
Yo.
Go Bucks. Talk to you guys soon.
Go Bucks.